Dr. Jaclyn Chasse here, and today I'm joined by Lisa Murray, a licensed dietitian and also an herbalist and one of our medical educators at Emerson and Wellevate. So Lisa, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jaclyn. Hi, everybody.
So we're really excited to launch this best practice series. And, you know, if you have met me before, you know how super passionate I am about doctors being successful. There are so many patients who need our help, and they need an integrative, naturopathic, functional approach to healthcare. And so one of the big challenges is that I think most of us are drawn to integrative medicine, functional medicine, naturopathic, because we are so passionate about the clinical medicine. But I think what a lot of us don't really think through when we apply to nutrition programs and to naturopathic school, et cetera, is that we're also business owners. And for many people, that's the part of the job they don't really like. Thankfully, I love it. I grew up in a business family, and I've been able to work at Emerson on Ignite, and now with Wellevate too. I'm like just so passionate about making sure clinicians know how they can be successful in practice, and not only that, you can be like a total rock star, enjoy your clinical practice, and set up your business so you can really focus on your strengths, whether that's clinical medicine or marketing or whatever it is that you really love. So I asked my colleagues on a Facebook post what advice they would give to practitioners that are new in practice, and we were like inundated with great responses. Did you see the list of responses?
I saw the partial list, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had some really great suggestions, and one of them that really jumped out to me, a couple of practitioners had put out there, which was keeping your overhead low. And so I called it, don't get in over your head with overhead. And so thanks so much, Marnie Frisch, naturopathic doctor in Olympia, Washington, and Sunita Iyer, who's a naturopathic physician and midwife in Kenmore, Washington. Shout out to both of you for offering up that super important piece of advice. So Lisa and I want to spend a little bit of time just kind of chatting about why that's so important. So Lisa, tell me, why do you think it's important to be careful about overhead for a practice?
Well, I mean, it's kind of just like your own home budgeting, you know. I think it's really prudent to start out thinking, you know, you can have dreams of being big, but you have to be practical. So starting out with, if you're going to be a solo practitioner, kind of having an estimate of what you think you're going to be bringing in for revenue, and finding a space that's affordable, you know. So I think finding an affordable space right off the bat is probably one of the best ways to, you know, keep your overhead low. I know one practitioner who found a space that she absolutely loved, and it was a little bit more than she felt she could afford, but she got it anyway. It had extra rooms, and she rented out a room to another practitioner. So, you know, that's something I know a lot of people do. If you find your ideal space, if you think that you know, this is something you want to do, is bring on another practitioner to rent some space, that's great too. But I think being able to pay your rent every month and not go into debt is probably number one.
Yeah. I mean, generally if you're starting a brand new practice, then there are a certain number of months at the beginning when you don't have a huge bank of patients where you have to be prepared to pay all your bills without a lot of revenue. Yeah. And, you know, I call that being in the red, and you want to minimize the number of months that you're in the red at the start of a practice.
Yeah.
And I think there are some like real key ways. Rent is a huge one. That's a fixed cost once you sign into an agreement, to really make sure that you keep your overhead low. So as far as rent, let's start there. Like, what are some things that you've seen our customers do that helps them on the rent side to keep their overhead low? So you mentioned renting a space. If you have a space that's bigger than what just you need, then renting out a space is a great option to kind of get another practitioner in there.
Yep. I've seen other practitioners also do share space. So, you know, some practitioners are working certain hours or certain days, maybe 4 days a week, and maybe they overlap, you know, they don't overlap. So some people are doing mornings, some people are doing evenings, and they'll share space with another practitioner.
That's a great idea. So even if you only have one treatment room, especially when you're first getting started, maybe you know that you won't use more than 20 hours a week, find someone else who could use that same space the other 20 hours and share the cost.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Because, it takes time to grow a practice, so you're not using the space the entire, the entire time. And that's true for other new practitioners as well.
Yeah. I've also seen practitioners who decide to rent a room in an existing space, and a little bit different than we talked about before we got on camera, becoming an associate somewhere, which is a way that you don't have overhead, but you also don't have ownership.
Right.
But I think even finding an office where if there was extra space, you could pick up that room part-time or full-time and be able to only pay a small amount and kind of grow into it.
Exactly.
Is another really nice option for as far as the rent goes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a two-way street. You can either, get a larger space and rent out to a practitioner, or be a practitioner looking for, to rent out a room with another practitioner. So that's what I see a lot of people do, and that seems to work for a lot of people when they're starting out.
Yeah. I mean, I was shocked. So when I graduated from school, I had to look for a new office space for myself. And, I was shocked at the prices. We're in New Hampshire, and this was in Bedford, New Hampshire, which is probably one of the nicer spots in New Hampshire to have a practice, high per capita income. And they did the rent based upon what they call triple N rates, which is like $10 or $12 or $20 per square foot triple net, which basically means you have to pay all the other expenses. But what was extra shocking to me was that it's kind of as is, right? So you also have to pay for what's called fit up. Which means like making the office the way you want it to be. And that might not be a big deal if it's like a space that looks nice when you first come in. But when I moved into my second practice, which was much larger, about 5,000 square feet, our fit up was like over $50,000 when we moved into that space. And that was just painting the walls, replacing the flooring. We had to hang new ceiling tiles because we moved a couple of walls. We replaced the ones that looked kind of ratty. We installed a bathroom in the back that for like patients and labs, made it a lab space. I mean, there were things we had to do. And that wasn't my first practice, but fit ups get very expensive. And
sure,
in that instance, we took out an additional loan that we had to pay every month like a mortgage in order to pay the fit up, and that got added to our rent. So that would be my next tip, is like when it comes to fit up, keep it really simple and try to find a place where you can, at least at the beginning, work with what you have, because the last thing you want to do is like sink a lot of money into a space that you don't own. And I've sold that clinic. I'm not there anymore. And the new owner actually purchased a property and then did a great fit up because it's a real estate investment.
Sure, and it's hers. Yeah,
and it's theirs. But when it comes to renting a space, like minimize the fit up that you need, and maybe get an estimate before you sign on to a space, just to make sure that you're not shocked in the end at what that costs.
Right. I mean, everybody wants a beautiful space for their patients to come in. But simple, keeping it simple. I mean, they're there to see you, and yes, it's important to make a good impression. But again, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be your dream space. Most likely, you might move. So it's good to think of in terms of maybe it's not permanent. Maybe you will move later. So just keeping it simple.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about space. What about other kind of fixed, necessary expenses that people need? Like, what are the other things that come to mind for you?
I think, people think that they have to have a whole lot of, like maybe a front office space, maybe a big dispensary, payment systems. But you know what? I know practitioners that just start out with their laptop and a square to run credit cards, and that's it. A desk, a laptop, and a square. And as far as, like front office, like that may be your dream. And as your practice grows, it will be necessary, especially if you are taking insurance. But I think initially a lot of people just start off putting that extra effort in for themselves. And that, of course, is going to keep your overhead really low and more flexible, because you can do the work when it's convenient for you and you're not waiting on somebody else or working around somebody else. So
now that is a huge area. And actually that's something that came up a lot in the suggestions that were given, was about the value of a front office person and how they like pay for themselves in spades.
Yep.
And I've definitely experienced that. Like if you find a good front desk person, they increase your practice revenue in a lot of ways. But when you first get started, it is a huge expense. And,
it is.
You know, when you pay someone, you also have to pay payroll taxes and whatever benefits they need, and it triggers legal obligations. So you might need an accountant or an HR consultant or other people to help make sure that you do it correctly. And that, you know, can be a big overhead. And in our office, we had 2 front desk people because it was a big practice. We had about 10 to 15 practitioners at any given time. But the front desk staff actually cost more than our exorbitant rent, which is already high. But it cost us so much to have them. And I think there's probably a calculation like where that you can find that tipping point of when the value they bring outweighs the cost. You know, which probably becomes the point when you're so busy that you're losing clinical hours and you have patients who want to see you, but your time is instead being spent on, you know, office management.
Yeah, I think that's easy to find, you know, to feel out that when you're finally at that spot where you're having to take your clinical hours in order to process paperwork, and you know that's the point where you say, okay, I need some help. And then there's lots of people who will, you know, just do a part-time work, you know, 2 or 3 hours a day. You don't have to hire someone full-time or someone for, you know, 2 days a week or 3 days a week to process your bills, your paperwork, whatever. So I think really trying to keep it small initially and stay within your budget.
Yeah. One of the things I did in that intermediary time, so when I started, I was my own receptionist, and I did share my space with an acupuncturist, and we kind of worked for each other in that reception role. So I would answer the phone when I was up front and didn't have a patient, and Allison, the acupuncturist, would do the same thing. But we did get to a point where we felt like we really need someone who can answer the phone consistently. We used a remote receptionist for about a year, and that was something where you kind of create a contract where you anticipate how many hours you need, and then we paid that amount monthly, and then we were billed for any overage, and that really worked well for us. It, you know, took us a little bit of time for them to get to be the representative of our brand when people called and answered the phone. But once they got to know our business, they did a good job. They scheduled patients, they took messages for us about, you know, refills or labs or anything that needed to be done. And that was a nice way because we could pay only for what we used versus hiring someone to be in the office. So
yeah, I mean, on the same veins, I think a lot of people, solo practitioners are using, like if they're taking insurance, using a billing service. So then they're spending their time either marketing or seeing patients and not spending time trying to figure out all the insurance bills and you know all that kind of thing. So I think a billing service is a good investment as well.
Yeah, I think so too, because it can be very time consuming to try to submit bills for reimbursement.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, you know, what about some of the other areas of practice that you think could be simplified when practitioners first get started? And I say simplified, but I think, you know, the big piece of it is lower overhead as well. You mentioned Stripe versus coming up with a whole big QuickBooks and like merchant account system. Yeah,
I mean, definitely keeping it simple for, you know, doing your charges. You can use Stripe, things like that. Also, like a lot of people think that they have to have it all figured out at the beginning. Like, oh, I've got to have my logo. Oh, I've got to know exactly what my name's going to be. Oh, I've got to have this incredible marketing strategy. And none of that is true. Like, you can change your name or your logo anytime you want. So come up with something simple. I mean, you can pay for an inexpensive logo at Fiverr. You know, Fiverr.com, and also a do-it-yourself website. So, you know, just you can get a little bit of help, but you don't have to pay a lot of money for a super savvy website either. So these are ways you can really keep your overhead down. You're not spending money each month to some marketing agency to host your site and do the updates. I mean, it's really important that you don't feel the need to have to do that to like keep up with, you know, everybody else. You will grow into that.
Yeah.
But initially, just keep it simple.
Did you know that your son made my practice logo?
Yes, he does everyone. He does everybody in New Hampshire.
Lisa's son owns a graphic design firm, and he's like a really talented artist. And this is like over 10 years ago now, before you and I worked together. But I had engaged Adam to help us come up with our practice logo. He did a great job, but it cost us several $1,000s. And it was a very professional process. He like came up with lots of concepts and then reviewed them, and we picked our favorite kind of path and then critiqued them, and then he came back again with the second round. When I created my kind of practice that I have today, which is the streamlined, simplified practice, I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. I did it through like a logo design competition like Fiverr.
Yeah.
And it worked out great. I got something that is perfect for me. I loved it just as much, and I paid $300 for it.
Exactly. There's so many options now, and so many do-it-yourself web platforms that are really simple, you know, to learn. And you don't have to spend exorbitant amounts of upfront money designing a logo, coming up with a website, and developing a marketing plan. That's kind of in the past, you know, but you can always get there. At some point you might want to do that. You might want to rebrand, you might be changing locations, and then all that is really helpful. But if you can't afford it up front, you know, there's other options.
Yeah, now website, that's a big one, because you can dump a ton of money into a website. I mean, when you get costs for websites, if you go with someone small and local, it might be $1,000 to $2,000 or $1,000 to $3,000. If you go with a bigger company, like when I was getting quotes, some of them were over $10,000, and it felt like something very simple that I needed, like what I'd consider a brochure site, which is like maybe 3 to 5 pages of information about your practice. That's really the minimum you need, just enough to just say who you are, a little bit about your practice philosophy and what you offer, maybe pricing and your contact information.
Yeah, but now you can pay $300. There's so many platforms out there
or
that
less.
you can do it yourself, or less.
And you know, tools like, you know, WordPress is a great option, but like Squarespace, and there's so many out there. And the thing is, they're meant for people who don't know what they're doing on the web.
Exactly.
So their templates are really straightforward. They walk you through step by step. And then the other piece of it is that their help sections generally are loaded with videos, and you can learn anything.
Oh, and just calling customer support. They usually are really helpful. I mean, because it's their business. They're trying to generate as many customers as possible, so they are really helpful.
You know, funny enough, this is another piece, is like, you know, when you make an investment, are you getting the money out of it? Are you getting the return out of that investment? And that is a problem for businesses large and small. So I was talking with our chief technology officer here just last week, and he was saying that we use software platforms and we don't even get the most out of their customer support team, and we pay our staff to do work that we could call their customer support team, and they do it for us. So it's not just a problem for us new business people, it's a problem also for experienced business owners about how to leverage the resources that are around you.
You don't have to always figure it out yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I also want to talk a little bit about like some of the software that we use in practice, because I think that's another big investment that feels like a big leap. And like practice management software is a great example. There are so many to choose from. They're all nuanced and a little bit different, but they can have a pretty high buy-in cost. And the trouble with it is that there's such an upfront time investment to get started on it that you know, I talk with a lot of practitioners who are like, I feel like I chose the wrong platform, but then to move, it's like starting over and the cost. And so maybe what are some ways that you've seen practitioners avoid feeling kind of trapped in that software game?
The people that I know in practice right here in New Hampshire have just chosen when they're starting out, they've chosen the low cost or the free service. Upgrades are available, like scheduling upgrades and things like that. But I think, you know, it's maybe a 2-day investment to switch to a different platform. It's going to be a 2-day investment to go to the free platform too. So, I mean, I think if you're trying to avoid overhead, you just want to keep it simple. You know, go with what's going to work for you and what you can afford. Yeah. So, you know.
And I know a lot of docs who are still paper charting.
Yes.
And that's an okay thing to do. You know, So don't feel ashamed if that's you.
That's right.
But I also know docs who have a filing system within their own computer where they basically store like paper charts, basically like Word documents that get saved for patient visits, and they file and upload labs and stuff. So rather than buy a software, they create their own system. And of course, you have to be careful with HIPAA compliance to make sure that your documents are adequately protected. So you need an IT professional to make sure your computer is locked out and that that's a safe and secure way to store the data. But I think you're right, you don't necessarily need a full practice management suite, especially right off the bat.
No, and I think it's really important to keep in mind that when your needs do grow and get bigger, you're probably going to have that front office staff to make the transition for you. So just, choose a product that suits your budget, that makes sense. There's free ones out there that people are using. It's not just you. You're not cheaping out. Like, they're there for you for a reason. And people are very happy with them, and maybe they're not perfect. But again, as you grow, if you decide to change, usually, most people will have office staff at that point to make that transition.
Yeah, right. So another kind of area that, of course, we've got to talk about is dispensary.
Ah, yes. Big upfront load cost.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember when I was first starting my practice as a solo practitioner, when I created the list, because I was general family practice, so when I thought through the list of what I needed to have in office, it was between $5,000 and $10,000 up front.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, I've got a lot of student loans. I just moved across the country. I haven't worked all summer because I've been studying for boards. And now I'm starting my practice and I have signed this this lease agreement. And how am I going to do this? Like, thank you very much, companies that are giving me a discount on my first order, but that's not enough. Can I consign them?
Yeah, exactly.
And that was another humongous upfront overhead. So what are some of the things that people have done that you know of to help to limit that cost?
Well, that has been a big problem in the past, which I know now isn't such a problem anymore because of Wellevate and online dispensaries. So I think there was no way around doing orders 2 or 3 times a week, because people were ordering and per patient, and because they couldn't afford an upfront dispensary. So you have a patient in, you see what they need, you tell them, okay, I'll have your stuff in 2 days, you order it for them, they show up and pick it up, and it's that was so time consuming, and still is for practitioners who are still operating that way. But there wasn't really much way around that system.
Yeah.
I know some practitioners, they'll keep a small dispensary of liquid herbal extracts so that they can mix them, but everything else was kind of ordered on a per patient basis.
Yeah.
Which is super time consuming.
And inefficient, and has higher costs because you pay shipping fees on all these small orders that if you could plan ahead and get more, you could save that.
It's also
costs.
really inconvenient for the patients because then they have to take time out of their day to come by and pick up their supplements, and then you have to have some kind of a pickup system if you're not open. Yeah, it wasn't ideal.
Yeah, I definitely think Wellevate is an awesome solution for that.
Yes.
Online dispensaries have just transformed that overhead. And when I was running the big practice, we had 4 naturopathic doctors, several nutritionists, a chiropractor who prescribed supplements. Unfortunately, we all liked different products. So even we had 12 multivitamins because we all liked different things. And when a doctor wanted a new product to be stocked in the dispensary, we'd buy a couple of them, and invariably every year we'd have things that we threw away because we thought we'd prescribe them, and then turns out you don't. And I was a practice owner managing this for everyone, so I paid the cost of having that product come to expiration and not get used. So the online dispensary is a great way to avoid the upfront overhead, but also avoid the loss that you get. And and in a bigger practice environment, we also had, unfortunately, loss. I won't say theft, but I don't know what it was. Maybe just not recording adequately when you take something for a patient or to take it home for yourself, and keeping track of that product that was pretty substantial, probably a couple $1,000s a year.
Yeah, there's always going to be loss with an in-house dispensary due to expiration, due to patients just not picking up their supplements, due to, and like you said, just loss.
Yeah.
Like people dispense the wrong supplements, your front office staff. There's just always going to be that loss factor. But with online dispensaries like Wellevate, there is no loss factor. The patients get what they need, what they want, when they need it. It's, immediate, and it's super convenient for both the practitioner and the patient.
Yeah, and the other piece of that is I think back about both the practice spaces I've been in, the dispensary's taken up a room.
Yes.
And so that room could be repurposed to another treatment room. And so instead of that, being shelving, I could have been earning revenue off of that space, which of course helps with your overhead.
Exactly.
So definitely that's a great option.
Yeah, I know most doctors, they want, now they're able to stock the products that they need, that they give to almost everybody. So maybe you want your patient to leave with the right multivitamin, the right probiotics, some fish oil, whatever. And also, like those herbal extracts that need to be mixed or whatever. It allows the doctors to have the products that they need and use every day so that they can keep what they need and what they want their patients to leave with. And then those specialty items come, a day or two later.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there any other overhead costs, like major buckets or categories that we're missing that are really fixed that you kind of have to have in your practice?
I think we covered rent. We covered
staff.
We covered equipment.
Supplements. And
I think really dispensary, was one of the major investments that doesn't have to be, such a major investment anymore.
Yeah. So one thing that I think has been a very interesting trend in the integrative space is the conversion into what I would call an ultra low overhead practice. I took this leap, and I couldn't be happier that I've done that. Just to give an idea, in my larger practice environment, just our rent plus utilities overhead was like $15,000 a month. It was a lot of money. And then when you add staff to that, et cetera, it created a lot of pressure to drive revenue and get to see more patients and turn more patients. And, we didn't put any kind of criteria upon docs to sell more supplements, but I could see where that pressure comes from because it's a lot to float a practice. But going to an ultra low overhead practice, what's been amazing about it, and what's amazing generally about lower overhead, is for every dollar you lower overhead, that's an extra dollar that you literally put in your own pocket.
Absolutely.
And so whatever you're not paying towards your rent, that's more profit for you for take home. And so you always have to balance that out. Do I want that new fancy suite of an office, or do I want to keep my overhead low and work less hours to make the same money, or be able to spend more time with patients, or just have a higher level of income? So for my practice, I've actually gone totally telemedicine based. And it happened more because I was getting more and more patients from afar because I have a specialty in infertility, and was getting referrals from all over the country. And I would drive into my practice, I would sit at my desk in my office, and then I would take half to 3/4 of my patient visits by phone. And I was like, gosh, I'm paying a lot of money to be in this space to be on the phone. I could be on the phone anywhere. And that's why I eventually left and did a telemedicine-based practice, which I don't have any rent, and that's a humongous drop in overhead. My only expenses are my computer, my cell phone bill, and that's really all I can think of. I use PayPal to invoice my patients. It's free. It tracks it for me. And then I use Wellevate as an online dispensary. So I've really simplified it. I do my bookkeeping primarily through Excel because I don't have supplies I'm buying. I don't have all this money coming in and out. It's very simple. And when a patient pays me for a visit, that money that comes in, other than subtracting out credit card fees, 100% of it comes into my bank account.
Yes. Yeah.
And my expenses out are $80 a month for my cell phone.
Yeah. And I know, and for integrative practitioners, the whole idea of telemedicine, like, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it wasn't very practical because how do you get your supplements, to your patients? Drop shipping, there's fees involved, there's, just a lot of organization. And it took time for the patients to get them. And I feel like the user friendliness, the ability to do telemedicine.
Yeah.
Because everything is so much simpler. And I think a lot of people are looking into that route. I know there's a lot of regulatory issues, it's state by state, but, looking into that, spending time looking into that, getting your malpractice, making sure that your malpractice insurance has a rider for telemedicine, just looking into all of that in, the time, I think will pay off huge in the long run. And I think more and more people are going that direction because it's convenient for the patient.
Yeah.
The patient doesn't have to, get dressed, go out, get in their car, drive to your practice, take time off of work. Nobody has to do that anymore.
Yeah, and it's so convenient for the patient. Even on the ordering supplement side, I found that since using Wellevate, my patients order more refills than they ever used to when they bought in practice.
Sure.
Because they don't have to call, wait, drive in, pick it up, etc.
Exactly.
It's like so easy. People are just used to getting what they want when they want it now.
Exactly. And they don't have to go to Amazon. They can get the right product for them. They can continue on their protocol by using Wellevate.
Yeah. And that extreme low overhead, for me, it means that it's a higher profitability opportunity for me. So like I said, the money that I make, it goes directly into my bank account versus into feeding this practice. And that's been incredible for me because it allows me to augment my income, with my practice and have it be a really valuable use of my time.
Yes. Certainly there are many practitioners now who are solely doing their practice by telemedicine. And then there's many who are, just for convenience for the patients who maybe have patients across the state or 4 or 5 hours away. It's just easier for them, to do a telemedicine type of visit.
Or even part-time, remote practice. So it doesn't even have to be that you have to do all or nothing.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Maybe
combining
1 or 2 days a week. Yeah, combining the two.
Especially if you have, patients come a long way to see you. And then if you can do follow-up visits with them and keep them on their plan using telemedicine and Wellevate, that, like you said, it's money in your pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Anything else you think we absolutely have to cover when it comes to keeping overhead low?
No, I think from everything we've seen and the people we've talked to, I think we've hit all the major points.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, bottom line is don't get in over your head with overhead because you want to make sure that the time that you spend with your patients is coming back to you with revenue. I mean, I know that if you're watching this, you're probably in the field because you love what you do and because you're passionate about helping people be well, but you also deserve to be well. You deserve to not have financial stress. You deserve to be able to pay off your student loan debt. You deserve to live a good life and take vacations and have the things that you enjoy and really have that work-life balance. And I really think that when it comes to being successful in practice, it's not about how big your practice is, it's about how profitable it is for its size. And overhead is absolutely the first place that you should start because you have to pay it every single month.
Yes. You have to have a healthy financial picture too.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, this is really the first of our best practice series. Hopefully you got some useful information. I want to thank again Dr. Iyer and Dr. Frisch who gave us this suggestion to talk about keeping overhead low. I think you guys are spot on, and keep up the good work and keep up the mentorship that you're giving to clinicians around us. Hopefully this best practice series is helpful for you, and we're going to continue to share with you some of the insights that we get from our top customers that are really rock stars in their own practices so that we can kind of share that info with you and help you build the practice of your dreams. So thanks for joining us today, Lisa, and thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.